was named Crown Princess on a scorching day in the middle of winter, a time known as 999 heat. The Crown Prince's wedding, however, came with the vibrant colors of spring. The sun shone with boundless brilliance. I sat in a small sedan chair, carried by people who walked me through a street filled with the joyous thunder of firecrackers. I entered the Eastern Palace through a side door, stepping onto a river of happiness. Everyone knew that Shone, the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Dingyuan, was no ordinary lady. What did unordinary mean? Due to the immense wealth and prestige of the Marquis's estate, no one dared to speak of it. I wasn't to blame, of course. Before I turned 10, I lived in the northern borderlands, raised by my father and older brothers. The customs of that land were already harsh, and I was further honed in the military camps. If I could write beautiful characters and embroider skillfully, that would be the true meaning of unordinary. Though I wasn't good at needlework or household duties, I had learned things those other girls couldn't. When I was 6, I had tamed the young horse my father chose for me. My innate talent for riding horses even earned the praise of my 2 elder brothers, who were usually too proud to notice. While I galloped freely across the northern plains, I doubted the young ladies of the capital could even run, let alone ride a horse. By the age of 9, I was already proficient in archery. I can't boast of 100% accuracy, but I was 1,000 times better than those city girls. So, when I first returned to the capital and heard the gossip, my jaw nearly dropped. I hadn't even had a chance to mock their weakness before they began mocking me. My parents had a huge argument over my return to the capital. I had 2 older half-sisters. My eldest sister had married into the minister's estate last year, and my second sister's marriage was already arranged, awaiting her coming of age this year. My mother considered her duties fulfilled and planned for me next. My brothers were with my father in the north, and only one younger brother remained in the capital with my mother. You could say she had a lot of free time. I should have been raised by my mother in the capital, but the year I was born, my father won a great battle and was overjoyed. He named me Onbei, entrusting me with great expectations. Thus, though I was the only legitimate daughter, I never lived the life of a proper lady. My father kept me by his side and taught me himself, only returning to the capital for holidays. One day, while I was practicing spear fighting in the courtyard, I heard a heated argument from inside the room. My mother, usually a gentle person, was unyielding when she was angry. "I told you years ago," she said. "What kind of name is Onbei? Do you really hope your own daughter will pacify the northern border?" My father's voice lowered. "Onbei was taught by my own hand. She's not an ordinary girl like the rest of you. As a subject of Great Liang, she also has a responsibility to pacify it." My mother was trembling with anger. "But she is a girl after all, meant to be married off. Do you think spoiling her and letting her run wild on the border is good for her? The battlefield is unforgiving. Do you truly have the heart for that? If this continues, who will dare to marry her? Do you want to ruin her life?" My father fell silent. Seeing that he was wavering, my mother softened her tone. "After the new year, when you and the boys return to the north, leave her here in the capital." My father sighed and finally agreed. I was stunned. Unconsciously, I snapped the red tassel on my spear. My father and brothers left for the northern borders, and sure enough, they didn't take me with them. I wanted to cry. After all, it was my father and brothers who had raised me. I was closer to them. Though my father was strict, he loved me deeply. I preferred riding horses and archery to playing the zither and painting. Now, I was locked up like a small wolf in a gilded cage. It was unbearable. But I remembered that my father hated seeing me cry, so I held back my tears. My eldest brother ruffled my hair, smiling and telling me to be a good lady. He took off his sword, his usual one, and gave it to me, telling me to use it for exercise. My second brother also smiled, saying he had nothing to give but promised to take care of my red horse. Before leaving, my father told me, "Onbei, no matter what, you are the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Dingyuan. No one will dare to criticize you even if you are a little wild." With that, the brave procession departed. Seeing the sudden silence in the estate, my heart was filled with endless sorrow, and I finally understood a little of my mother's feelings. Thus, at the age of 10, I began my life as a young lady in the Marquis' estate. To be honest, there was nothing noteworthy about it. Compared to 10 years of running free in the north, 2 years in the capital were as bland as water. If my mother heard me say that, I'd surely be punished. Only during holidays, when my father and brothers returned, could I finally breathe a sigh of relief. No more zither, no more painting, no more poetry. My father, when he had time, would teach me a few sword moves and take me to the horse arena to ride to my heart's content. In short, I'm sure no one in the capital looked forward to the new year more than I did. Although my mother forced me to learn all these things, my personality became a little more restrained, but my reputation didn't keep up with my growth. I once played a game of polo with a few young ladies from the ministers' and scholars' estates. Their riding was terrible, and they kept making fun of me. In a moment of impatience, I whipped a horse, causing the young lady to fall off. She was bedridden for half a month. Another time, I secretly snuck out of the estate and was targeted by a thief for the scented pouch on my waist. I didn't hold back and broke his arm in the middle of the street. With incidents like these, I thought I had a little lady quality. But I was just being awkward and trying to be something I wasn't. Perhaps I was destined to be a boy from the start. That night, while I was learning needlework, I looked at my hands and felt a pang of pity. These hands could wield a sword, a spear, and even break a person's arm. In the northern borderlands, they might have achieved great merit. Now they were cooped up, threading a needle to embroider. What a shame. My father had left me in the capital, partly to comfort my mother. As days went by, I couldn't be sure if she was comforted, but the look of sorrow on her face deepened. I grew to be 13. That year, with the coming of spring, my father and brothers stayed home a little longer. It was also the season for the spring hunt. When I heard the news, I became obedient and went to my parents, begging to go. After much pleading, my father finally agreed, but with a warning not to be mischievous. My brothers had been officially participating in the spring hunt since they were 10. I, the stubborn one, had to wait until I was 13 just to tag along. I was a little resentful. I had to prove to them that not leaving me in the north was Great Liang's greatest loss. Since my little red horse wasn't in the capital, I had to ride a little white horse. It wasn't as agile as my red one, but it was much more well-behaved, so I didn't have to train it. That day, I put on a new begonia pink riding outfit, used my familiar horn bow, and tied my hair up. I felt invigorated. My father still didn't agree to let me join them directly in the hunting grounds. He only allowed me to ride around the safe zone, shoot a few rabbits for fun. I smiled and agreed, but in my heart I was calculating. Once everyone scatters, the hunting grounds are so vast. Who will notice where I am? So I rode leisurely for 2 rounds, shooting 2 geese along the way. I was pleased that my skills hadn't dulled at all, and I spurred my horse deeper into the forest. My riding and archery skills were taught by my father himself. People say that a general's daughter is no coward, and that's absolutely true. I let my horse run wild for a while before I remembered my plan to show off to my father and brothers. With this new intention, I noticed a shadow flitting through the thick foliage ahead. I immediately whipped my horse and charged. It was a deer, leaping gracefully ahead of me. I narrowed my eyes, nocked an arrow, and drew my bow. With a whoosh, the arrow shot out, but unfortunately, the deer dodged at the last moment. It was hit in the leg. I was a little annoyed and clamped my legs against my horse's belly. I swung the whip and chased the deer. My hand might have been a little too strong, and this horse wasn't my little red one. It didn't listen at all and panicked instead. I cursed the imperial stable for giving me such a horse for a hunt. It was only good for a leisurely stroll. Before I could worry about the running deer, I had to rein in the horse, which had reared up, about to throw me off. In that split second, I felt myself become light. The world spun, and when I came to, I was on the back of another horse. This horse was truly a magnificent steed. I marveled, gently stroking its mane, when I heard a soft laugh behind me. I froze and then remembered the deer I'd missed. Without even a word of thanks, I pulled the reins and turned my head, saying to the person behind me, "Sir, I'll borrow your horse for a bit," and spurred the horse to chase the deer. It was my first time riding with someone on the same horse, but thankfully, this person was a skilled rider and cooperated well. I didn't feel his presence at all, only that his gaze was always on the back of my neck. Following the blood trail, it wasn't long before we found the pitiful deer. I nocked another arrow and drew my bow, but it was a bit far, and my arm's strength had weakened. The arrow hit, but the deer still had the strength to run. I was anxious and was about to chase it again when I heard a whoosh from behind me. 3 arrows flew in quick succession, fast and precise. The deer could no longer resist. The last arrow pinned it to a tree. I couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. That strength and accuracy must be on par with my eldest brother's. I turned my head slightly, with a newfound respect, to look at him. He wore silver armor and had a bit of a heroic look about him. In the heat of the moment, I hadn't had a chance to thank him. I asked, "Sir, what should I call you?" He laughed softly again, his voice deep and pleasant. "It should be I who asks for your name, but I wonder when the capital got a young lady so skilled." I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic or genuinely complimenting me, so I was a little annoyed and looked straight into his eyes. I was taken aback to meet a pair of sparkling peach blossom eyes. His eyes shone like stars, reflecting my image in my crimson outfit. I was stunned and my heart beat wildly. I realized that this person wasn't my father or brothers. We were incredibly close on the same horse. He looked at me with some amusement, seeing my cheeks flush. "You weren't so shy when you snatched my horse just now." The world was alive with color, and deep in the forest, it was an even more vibrant green. A few flowers were in bloom, and birds chirped occasionally. The sound of hooves had faded, leaving only a faint echo. This was the scene of our first meeting, and it truly matched the beauty of the moment. I bit my lip, not knowing what to say, and wanted to jump off the horse. Perhaps my movement was too obvious, for he reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You probably can't ride that other horse anymore. Let me take you back. Are you planning to run back on foot?" I was speechless. I didn't know what might happen in this hunting forest, and since he had offered, I couldn't refuse. I sat still, moving a little forward to keep some distance from him. The horse slowly turned back. He occasionally said a few things to me. I had even forgotten that there were actually girls like me in the capital. From the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate. "I can't claim that. Your riding and archery seem quite good, but that last arrow was a little weak. I guess you haven't practiced in a while. Are you afraid of tearing your embroidery with too much force?" I explained honestly. "It's because I spend too much time on needlework that my hand strength has weakened." He was silent for a moment. After a long thought, I finally spoke up. "Although you were the one who killed that deer, I was the one who found it and wounded it first. So, how about we split it 70/30ths? "No need," he said, interrupting me. "How about 60/40ths? Or 50/50, I'm not that." He cut me off. "It's all yours." I was dumbfounded. To be honest, even without him, as long as my horse was obedient, I wasn't sure I couldn't have caught the deer. They were lively and fast. Hunting it was a way to show off my riding and archery skills. But he was giving all the credit to me. Well, maybe I'd met an idiot. Thinking that, I couldn't help but feel happy. I turned my head to smile at him, and he looked so pleasing to the eye. He was surprised by my glance, and his hand on the reins paused for a moment before he tightened them, feigning carelessness. I touched my face, wondering if there was something on it. Could I have startled him? A few pleasantries passed between us, and soon we were back at the starting point of the spring hunt. The ladies from all the estates were sitting in their tents, chatting. The largest, pale yellow tent in the middle belonged to the royal family. Without any directions, the horse circled around and stopped precisely in front of my family's tent. He dismounted first, stood firm, and then extended a hand to help me down. How ridiculous! I wasn't going to fall. I placed my hands on the horse's back and jumped off gracefully, giving him a triumphant look. He withdrew his hand and just smiled and shook his head. Since the tents were all for ladies, he didn't enter. He stood outside watching me go in. I entered my tent and then stuck my head back out to wave at him. He nodded, then mounted his horse and galloped away. My mother was sitting at the head of the table, sipping tea. She asked, "Why did His Highness the Crown Prince bring you back?" I grabbed a piece of pastry, stuffed my mouth and mumbled, "My horse was misbehaving, but thankfully, His Highness the Crown Prince rescued me." The Crown Prince. The old saying, "Don't talk with your mouth full or snore in your sleep," was truly wise. I was so startled I almost choked. I quickly grabbed a teacup, drank a few gulps and trembling asked, "Mother, who did you say brought me back?" She looked at me with an expression of shock and then heartbroken. "You've been in the capital for so many years, and you don't even recognize the Crown Prince?" I had been doing needlework, reading, and playing the zither every day for years, afraid of embarrassing the family in court. My mother hadn't even allowed me to attend palace banquets. How could I have had a chance to recognize the Crown Prince? Of course, I could only hold these complaints in my heart. My heart was in a tumult. My father and brothers were known loyal subjects who put the royal family first. If they knew I had stolen the Crown Prince's horse, stolen his deer, and even made him my personal driver, I'd probably be facing family law tonight. But this Crown Prince was completely different from what I imagined. The young gentlemen of the capital were mostly refined, fanning themselves with their fans, more graceful than I was. I thought the Crown Prince, as their leader, would be a refined scholar as well. I never expected him to be so heroic. I went back to my mother, not daring to go outside again. My purpose of showing off my skills had been achieved. Each arrow was marked with a family symbol, and now all that was left was to wait for the spoils to be counted. That evening, when my father and brothers returned, I heard my father calling me from a distance. I ran out excitedly, and my father picked me up and spun me around twice. "You are truly my daughter." My eldest brother handed me a bow. I could tell it was a precious item at a glance. He smiled and said, "This was bestowed by the emperor. There weren't many deer in the hunting grounds this year, so you're lucky. His Highness the Crown Prince also praised you quite a bit. It seems you finally have a place in the capital." I took the bow and tested the string. It was very comfortable. This spring hunt was a great success. The lively spring hunt ended, and my father and brothers were about to leave. After the hunt, my mother started taking me out, determined to make me a part of the circle of capital ladies. I let her dress me up as exquisitely as a porcelain doll for others to admire. With time I became more experienced. It was actually quite simple. Whether visiting or receiving guests, I just had to sit up straight and smile. But this smile had rules. It couldn't be as bright as before. It had to be restrained and subtle, a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. It was best not to speak, and if I had to, my answers had to be polite and concise. I wasn't allowed to touch the pastries on the table. That would lead to all sorts of trouble. When I was truly bored, I just sipped 2 mouthfuls of tea, a little at a time. I did this so often that my mother's face became more and more pleasant. Outsiders would say, "I've changed so much, becoming more poised and composed." I really didn't understand what they were basing this on, so I didn't bother to think about it. His Highness the Crown Prince also visited the estate every few days. I was happy to see him, not for any particular reason, but because his presence was a great honor, and I didn't have to practice needlework or play the zither. I could focus on entertaining the Crown Prince. Sometimes we would take a stroll and talk. Occasionally we'd change into casual clothes and secretly sneak out. It was truly interesting. That year, the days passed by very quickly, and soon winter came and it began to snow. The day my father and brothers returned to the capital, I woke up early to prepare everything with my mother for their arrival. That evening we had dinner. It had been a long time since the whole family was together. The kitchen prepared a pot of plum wine and a few small dishes. We drank wine and watched the snow fall. The room was heated so well that we were all sweating. My parents were talking and I couldn't get a word in, so I nudged my second brother and asked, "Brother, the person you came back with today looks familiar." It's not that I paid him any mind, but he looked at me a few times, so it was hard not to notice. My second brother thought for a moment. "You mean Xia Cheng?" He frowned. "The third son of General Zhenghua, Xia Qi?" The northern borderlands had always been a place of contention for the court. Since the late emperor ascended the throne, he had paid special attention to the border defenses, which is why he gave so much importance to military generals. Today, besides our Marquis of Dingyuan's estate, the power in the north was in the hands of General Zhenghua. Although both served the court, they essentially acted on their own. Fortunately, the north was vast, and our Qin family's army rarely clashed with the Xia family's army, so we didn't have much contact. My second brother took a sip of wine. "Yes, him. He's 2 years older than you. It's funny, you two used to have a little feud. Do you remember?" Now that he mentioned who it was, of course I remembered. When I was 9, I hadn't been confined by the rules of the capital yet and was free and uninhibited in the north. To protect my reputation, or more accurately, to make it easier for him to keep me in the military camps, my father made me tie my hair up and wear clothes like my brothers. My father's trusted generals would tease me all day, calling me little brother, so I even forgot that I was a girl. That day, the Xia family's army arrived. The 11-year-old Xia Cheng stormed into our military camp, and no one dared to stop him. He announced that he wanted to spar with someone from the Qin family. He stood in the middle of the training ground, shouting provocations, attracting many people who came to watch the excitement. I immediately urged my second brother to go and deal with him. My second brother sneered. "Our eldest brother is afraid he'll accidentally hurt him, which would make things difficult. I'm 1 year older than him, so it would look like I'm bullying him. It's not a glorious win. Forget it." Seeing that my second brother wouldn't go, I couldn't stand the offense. I turned, took my red spear from my second brother's hands, and went to the stage. At 9 years old, I had already mastered the Qin family's spearfighting techniques. But I was 2 years younger than him and a girl, so I was physically weaker. I had to rely on my agile footwork to evade his attacks. Xia Cheng had come to challenge us, so he was naturally prepared. I saw his saber techniques were strong and broad. I knew I would lose if the fight dragged on, and I didn't want to lose face in front of everyone, so I came up with another plan. I wasn't ashamed to use it. I had prepared a handful of sand hidden in my sleeve before I went on stage. I pretended to be hit by his saber, exposing a vulnerability. He charged forward, and at that moment, I threw the sand into his eyes. Just then, my eldest brother arrived. He leaped onto the stage from a distance, and with a flick of his sheathed sword, he knocked Xia Cheng's saber out of his hand. Knowing I was in trouble, I obediently stood to the side. Xia Cheng was furious and called me vile. I smiled gently, knowing he couldn't see clearly. "Young Master Xia, that's not right. Haven't you heard the saying, 'All's fair in war'?" When I opened my mouth, my feminine voice was revealed. Xia Cheng suddenly remembered that the legitimate daughter of the Qin family was 2 years younger than him, and he finally understood my second brother's meaning, that it wouldn't be a glorious win, and in the end, he still couldn't defeat me. My eldest brother saw that I wasn't hurt and sighed helplessly. Anbei quickly apologized to young Master Xia. "It was wrong of you to use such a move on the stage." I obediently bowed and apologized, and then intentionally added, "Anbei should still call young Master Xia big brother. I apologize for my offense against my senior." My eldest brother held back his laughter and also cupped his hands. "My little sister is young and stubborn. I hope young Master Xia won't take it to heart." Though Xia Cheng was full of anger, he could only swallow it and say nothing. Remembering the past, I couldn't help but laugh. To help me vent my anger, "You also secretly found a sack and beat him up." My second brother sighed. Afterward, I got 30 lashes with a military rod from my father and almost lost half my life. I kindly reminded him. Half of those 30 lashes were taken by our eldest brother for you. When you were halfway through, you went silent, which scared me and our father to death. My second brother glared at me. It's all your fault, you ungrateful little girl. I quickly changed the subject. Brother, why did you come back with him? We ran into each other on the way and just came back together. My second brother chuckled. We haven't seen each other in 3 years. We really need to see with new eyes. The Xia family's third son is also a handsome young man now. With our laughing and talking, half the night passed. The next day, I slept until noon. After eating, I leisurely went to the study. As expected, my eldest brother was there, holding a military book. I went to him, acting obedient, and poured a cup of hot tea. Big brother, have some water and rest. His furrowed brows relaxed, and he took the cup and drank it. I knew you'd come looking for me when you woke up. I smiled brightly. Of course. It's been so long since I've seen you. I've missed you so much. My eldest brother gave me a look of disgust. I quickly continued. Our teacher says to measure others' hearts with our own. I'm sure you missed me very much. By the way, what did you bring back for me this time? My eldest brother rolled his eyes at me, but finally turned to the bookshelf and rummaged through a pile of large and small items. I smiled even brighter, eagerly opening each one. This hairpin is exquisite. Big brother, you have good taste. I put it aside and then remembered something. Adian, no, His Highness the Crown Prince also sent many gifts. This one is so interesting. I picked out a strange-shaped item from the pile and muttered, more than a month ago, the Crown Prince sent me a jade puzzle, and I still haven't solved it. Yes, a few days ago, he sent one that looks similar. I rummaged through the pile for a while, but couldn't find what I really wanted, so I looked at my brother with a pitiful expression. His lips curled a little. Haven't you found anything you like? Oh right. His Highness the Crown Prince has given you almost all of these things already, so of course you don't find them new. How can they compare to what your big brother gives you? The gifts from Big Brother are the best in Onbei's heart. I had been flattering him since I was a child, so the words came out naturally. My eldest brother sighed helplessly and took out a wooden box from behind the bookshelf. I quickly snatched it and eagerly opened it. Inside was a small black crossbow with gold trim and 5 exquisite small arrows. I carefully took out the crossbow, cherishing it so much that I wiped it with my sleeve. This crossbow is small and convenient to carry. Though it's only enough for self-defense, it's very useful for you in the capital. My eldest brother teased me a little. Doesn't His Highness the Crown Prince know you like this kind of thing? I was so engrossed in playing with the crossbow that I answered him without thinking. He knows, but these things can't be given openly. It's not appropriate to give them secretly either. Seeing my brother's meaningful smile, my hand paused. I suddenly realized that all these frequent gifts and visits were a little unusual. Carefully chose my words. Big brother, do you think the Crown Prince might have feelings for me? My eldest brother's smile remained the same, making my hair stand on end. Onbei, tell me the truth. Do you like him? I thought to myself that my brother's question was too abrupt. We hadn't even had a single exchange yet, and he was already asking if I liked him. I wasn't even sure if I did or not. Just thinking about the strict rules of the Eastern Palace gave me a headache. My eldest brother sighed softly. You're so foolish. If you truly like someone, you will naturally change many things for them, and you won't find it troublesome. With that, his eyes looked a little sad. Also, you used the phrase languid and beautiful incorrectly. I almost choked on my tea and glared at him. Big brother, you're at the age to be talking about marriage. I wonder when you'll bring a sister-in-law home for me. Your words are getting more and more inappropriate. He reached out and lightly flicked my forehead. I yelped and rubbed my forehead. The northern borderlands may seem peaceful on the surface, but there are undercurrents. I don't have the mind to think about that. If you're really anxious, keep an eye out for me. If there's a young lady you like for a sister-in-law, let me know and I'll go propose." As the end of the year approached, my mother was busy with many things and no longer hounded me with my studies every day. It wasn't that I didn't like learning. When I was little, my two brothers took turns reading military books to me, and I was fascinated. But my mother forced me to study ladies' virtues and precepts, and after 3 or 4 lines, I'd start to yawn. I just couldn't get into it. It snowed continuously for 2 days, and it finally cleared up in the afternoon. My hands were itching. I secretly took my red spear to the backyard to practice a few spear techniques. Just then, the plum blossoms bloomed. I got bored with my practice and had a sudden idea to use my spear to knock the snow off the plum branches. In a flash, the snow and blossoms fell, making me think of the line, "Drifting wind and swirling snow." I carefully contemplated it and suddenly had an epiphany. The spear spun in a circle, the soft red tassel flying up, and then it spun again with a whoosh. A killing aura appeared. The plum branches fell. Just as I was enjoying myself, I heard footsteps approaching. I thought it was probably my eldest or second brother. Since someone had come to me, it was a perfect chance to test my new move. So, without turning around, I thrust my red spear straight at the source of the sound. I was still afraid of hurting someone, so I held back some of my strength. The person's footsteps stopped. He leaped into the air, circled over my head, and landed behind me. He smiled a little, and I quickly retracted my spear. I used the plum branches to attack again. The person bent down to pick up a plum branch I had knocked off earlier, and without looking up, he used the branch to flick up, avoiding my spear. He used the momentum to dissolve my attack, using 4 ounces to deflect 1,000 pounds. I used a set of the Shone family spear techniques, and then added the new move I had just come up with. The Shone family's spear techniques were very strong, but with my new move, they became a little softer. It was both righteous and a little strange and unpredictable. After 2 rounds, I realized that this person wasn't from the Shone family. His spear techniques weren't very refined. I was distracted and looked closer. As expected, the wind didn't just bring snow, it also brought His Highness the Crown Prince. He used the plum branch at a very clever angle, sweeping it at my spear, making my hand go numb and almost dropping the spear. He laughed softly, his voice deep. "Competing with me and you're still distracted?" I didn't dare to be careless anymore and focused on the fight. I don't know how many rounds we fought. I hadn't practiced much in recent years, so my stamina wasn't what it used to be. By the end, I was out of breath. He was leisurely leading the fight, as if intentionally giving me pointers. When he saw me panting, he withdrew the plum branch and aimed it at my spear. The poor branch broke in half. I retracted my spear and propped it on the ground, standing there to catch my breath for a while before I calmed down. "Why did you come in here?" He took off his cloak, walked a few steps forward, and naturally draped it over me, carefully tying the strings. "It's cold and you're sweating. You'll catch a cold from the wind." When he mentioned my eldest brother, I remembered our conversation in the study the other day, and I felt a little embarrassed. In the northern borderlands, I was used to not distinguishing between men and women. He had been visiting frequently, and I often disguised myself as a man to sneak out with him. I hadn't thought much of such actions before, but now I did. I was embarrassed. Fortunately, he didn't seem to notice. He even helped me brush off the snow that had fallen on my head from our fight. I secretly looked up at him, and our eyes met. I quickly looked down, staring at the ground. He chuckled softly above my head. I was annoyed and wanted to glare at him, but when I looked up, I met those peach blossom eyes again. They were curved a little from his smile, as if they held the stars. I was immediately softened. "Your eyes are so beautiful," I said sincerely. "Much more beautiful than the head courtesan at Yuefeng that we secretly went to see that day." He froze for a moment. He sighed. "I wish I had them. They're so beautiful, but they can't be used for anything." He quickly reached out and lightly tapped my forehead, gritting his teeth. but his voice was still gentle. If you don't know what to say, say less. My forehead seemed to be a popular place to be flicked. The Crown Prince had come today to personally deliver the Emperor's New Year's gifts. After I had caused a ruckus, he drank a few cups of tea with me to cool down and then left. That night, lying in bed, I was thinking about the spear techniques from today when I suddenly remembered those peach blossom eyes and burst out laughing. After I laughed, I felt a little scared. Why did I suddenly start laughing? Was I going crazy? On the 6th day of the new year, the Empress held a banquet for the ladies of all the estates. The young ladies were mostly my age. Before, only the madams attended. This year, for some reason, it was different. My mother was like a formidable enemy, warning me until her ears bled. I had seen the Empress before, but mostly from a distance or through a screen, so I couldn't see her face clearly. Now that I was meeting her up close, I realized where the Crown Prince got his peach blossom eyes from. However, the Empress had mastered the smile that doesn't reach the eyes to the extreme. On the surface, she was as gentle as a spring breeze, but I felt that her smile didn't reach the bottom of her eyes. Those eyes had also lost some of their vitality. When it was my turn to bow, I performed the ceremony solemnly. The Empress asked me to step forward and smiled as she looked me up and down. My heart was filled with anxiety. Seeing her up close, the forced smile was even more apparent. The appraising look in her eyes was identical to my mother's when choosing clothes. Fortunately, it didn't last long. The Empress laughed. This child is pleasing to my eye. I find her quite satisfactory. Ningguei handed me a golden-laid jade bracelet. I curtsied again and retreated to my mother's side, anxiously waiting for the banquet to end. On the carriage ride home, I sat with my mother, my hand caressing the jade bracelet. To receive such a reward from the Empress without merit makes one uneasy, I said worriedly. My mother, with her eyes closed, spoke languidly. Perhaps she simply found you pleasing to the eye. I tugged on her sleeve. I think the Empress's gaze is very sharp. How could she like me so much after just one meeting? My mother opened her eyes and looked at me for a moment. I thought she would scold me for belittling myself, but she nodded in agreement. I think so too. When we returned to the estate, my father and brothers were in the back hall. Since there were no outsiders, my mother and I went straight in. My father's brows furrowed deeply when he saw the Empress's gift. I had been acting poised and proper all day, and my back and waist ached. As soon as I entered, I collapsed onto a recliner, rubbing my back, thinking about how difficult it must be for my mother to live like this every day. Even with all my martial arts training, I hadn't been this tired. My father paced back and forth with his hands clasped behind his back. Finally, he made a decision and looked at my mother. Anbei is no longer a child. Let's arrange her marriage this year. I was startled and immediately looked at my mother. The Empress just gave her a reward. If you marry her off now, isn't that a slap in the face to the royal family? Today's banquet was clearly the Empress looking for a crown princess. My mother disapproved. Besides, His Highness the Crown Prince seems to have taken a liking to Anbei. The position of Crown Princess is not something one can just get. Nonsense. My father was a little angry. You are deluded. He pointed at me. Look at her. Does she have any qualities suitable for the Eastern Palace? Her personality is unmanageable. It would be best for her to marry into a commoner family who will love her and tolerate her spirit. No one would dare to look down on the daughter of the Marquis of Dingyuan. As a mother, how can you be so heartless as to push your daughter into a fire pit? In my heart, I vaguely felt that my father was calling me both foolish and arrogant, but I dared not argue. A storm of arguments erupted. My mother was finally swayed. She thought for a while and then looked worried. But everyone probably knows the Empress's intentions now. Even if we wanted to quickly arrange a marriage for Anbei, who would dare to ask for her hand? Seeing that the tension had eased, I leaned back in my chair, picked up a bowl of snow pear soup, and took a sip. My second brother then interjected. I almost forgot about this. A few days ago, the third son of the Xia family hinted to me that he was interested and asked me to sound you out. In my opinion, he is a good match for you. Is that so? My father paced a few more steps. The Xia family is also a military family, so there aren't too many troublesome rituals. Our two families have had little contact in the north. If they marry, it would be a decent arrangement. My hand trembled, and the snow pear soup spilled out, soaking my sleeve. I didn't even bother to wipe it. No. I slammed the bowl down on the table. I've only met Xia Cheng a few times. This idea of his is completely unfounded. He's probably still holding a grudge from our childhood feud and wants to marry me just to get revenge slowly. If that's the case, he's not very generous. Seeing that my mother was about to scold me for my unrestrained words, I looked to my eldest brother for help. Since my parents began talking about this, my eldest brother had been suppressing his laughter. Now, receiving my pleading gaze, he cleared his throat and finally spoke. Marriage is a serious matter determined by parents, but we should also ask for her opinion. After all, once she's married, no matter how much her family loves her, they can't handle everything for her. She has to walk her own path. I nodded frantically. Yes, what Big Brother said is right. If I choose my own path, I won't regret it no matter what happens later. My parents looked at each other, and my father laughed and sighed. Fine. I can't keep my grown-up daughter. I was just overthinking it. With that, the matter settled down. However, my second brother's words still frightened me a little. I was young and foolish back then, but it was just a sparring match. Why would he hold a grudge for so long? Xia Cheng was handsome and dignified, so if he wasn't so petty, I might have even liked him a little. Thinking this, I shivered. I couldn't marry him no matter what. From then on, I often avoided Xia Cheng. But the heavens often go against people's wishes. That day, the Prime Minister's wife hosted a banquet, inviting many ladies and madams from the court. I felt suffocated at the banquet and asked my mother for permission to get some fresh air. A young maid led the way, so I wasn't worried about getting lost. As I strolled leisurely by the lake, I unexpectedly saw Xia Cheng approaching from the opposite direction, with only one attendant by his side. I thought, this is bad, and turned to leave. Little sister from the Qin family, Xia Cheng called out. The word sister made me stop dead in my tracks. There was no escape. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and turned around. How are you, young Master Xia? He strode up to me. I haven't seen you around lately. I cursed in my heart. It would be strange if you did. But on the surface I smiled faintly. It must be a coincidence. As I spoke, I discreetly took a step back. He stopped and laughed heartily. You've truly changed from when you were little. I screamed in my heart. It's just as I predicted. He's still holding a grudge from that fight years ago. How petty. Although I thought this, I still had to bow my head in apology. Anbei was young and foolish back then. Thinking about it, I'm quite ashamed. Before he could reply, I heard a familiar voice from a distance. Anbei. I turned around and curtsied. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Xia Cheng also bowed. The Crown Prince nodded slightly and stopped. Your brother has been looking for you everywhere. He must have something to discuss. I'll take you there. I felt like I had been granted a reprieve and happily walked away from Xia Cheng toward the Crown Prince. After a few steps, I realized the direction he was leading me was not toward the banquet. His lips were pursed and he looked unhappy. I couldn't help but ask, "Where's my brother?" He glared at me as if I were a piece of worthless iron. I was just making it up. I was stunned, not understanding why he had suddenly appeared or what he was trying to do. I know you two grew up together, but it's really not appropriate to meet alone like this. If others see you, who knows what rumors they'll start. I was stunned again. He had already dismissed my maid, so it was just the two of us. Xia Cheng and I had both brought our attendants, so I just kept quiet, seeing his unhappy face. Seeing my silence, he stopped. Are you unhappy? Or should I take you back so you two can talk freely? I was secretly surprised. Why was he so moody today? I was happy, yet he said I wasn't. But I was afraid of saying too much and making him more upset, so I just said softly, "No, there's no need." He glanced at me, gave a cold laugh, turned and walked away quickly. I touched my nose, worried that something had upset him. He was a perfect example of someone who takes a mile when you give him an inch. The more you concede, the more he encroaches. Fortunately, I was in a good mood today, so I was generous and didn't hold it against him. This outing was truly bizarre. I returned to the banquet alone. As spring began, my father and brothers left for the northern border. Xiacheng also finally left the capital. So, the next time the Crown Prince and I met, he was as carefree as if nothing had happened. That year, the heavens did not favor us. The lands of Hu suffered a continuous drought and began to eye the central plains. The war on the border was intense, and letters home were not as frequent as in previous years. The capital remained quiet. My mother became even more strict with my every action and gesture. My coming of age was approaching, and the estate began to prepare my dowry. Although I didn't have to do the needlework myself, the pieces were brought to me to add a few stitches for good luck. In the autumn, the Grand General suffered 2 defeats, infuriating the emperor. Xiacheng was wounded and brought back to the capital early. No matter how much I avoided him, he was still an old acquaintance. I heard that he had been surrounded by the enemy while trying to save the citizens. He led a small troop and fought their way out, but by the time he was escorted back to the capital, he was unconscious. In my heart, besides admiration, there was also some concern. My mother, for the sake of propriety, had to visit on behalf of the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate. I begged my mother to let me go with her. The emperor sent an imperial physician who worked all night to save his life. When my mother and I arrived, he was still unconscious. I looked at him, feeling a sense of solemnity and emotion. I thought to myself that I had judged a gentleman's heart with a villain's mind. Seemed my second brother was right about him. The third son of the Xia family was no longer the arrogant boy from years ago. The harsh winds and frost of the border had honed him into a sharp and reserved sword. He was truly a man who could stand tall. When he finally recovered, it was already winter. During that time, I gradually let go of my prejudice and visited him every half-month. I had always had a great ambition to sacrifice myself for the country and protect the people of Great Liang, but as a girl, I couldn't act on it. Now, seeing someone else do what I couldn't, my heart was a little comforted. The war on the border was urgent. As soon as he recovered, he returned to the northern border. That winter was exceptionally cold. The 999 period was even more bitterly cold. One afternoon, the sun unexpectedly shone, and the warm rays felt pleasant. My mother called me to break a few red plum branches to put in a vase. I carefully chose the most blooming branch and arranged it in a white porcelain vase. My mother smiled and shook her head, teaching me, "A fully bloomed flower is beautiful, but for a vase, it's best to choose a budding branch." Seeing my confusion, she said, "You must also understand the principle that the extreme of prosperity leads to decline. If you break a fully bloomed flower, it will wither in a few days." I thought that made sense and was about to go pick another branch. Just then, a eunuch from the palace arrived with an imperial decree. The virtuous and elegant lady, Tan Onbei, daughter of Marquis Qin Yuanzhou of the Dingyuan, is pure and chaste, dignified and gentle, and worthy of the Dragon Throne's everlasting favor. She is hereby appointed Crown Princess. The relevant departments are commanded to prepare the investiture ceremony. The officials in charge are to carry out this decree. The decree came as a surprise, but it was also reasonable. My mother had mentioned it many times, and the Crown Prince had already expressed his feelings more than a month ago. I had already prepared myself for it. I reached out and touched the piece of jade on my waist. The Crown Prince had tied this jade for me himself. It was originally a pair. He kept one piece with him. He said, "The jade is now a pair. You and I should also become a pair." That day, I was sitting in the study practicing my calligraphy. When I got tired, I casually drew a few strokes and unconsciously wrote the 3 characters, Xiao Qingyan. I was lost in thought, looking at those 3 characters, and didn't even notice when he stood behind me. He laughed softly behind my back, and I was startled, feeling both shy and annoyed. I was about to put the paper away, but he held my hand. He stood behind me, held my hand, and guided my brush, stroke by stroke, to write my name next to his. The ink was filled with emotion. It was the first time in my life that I had seen anyone dare to write the Crown Prince's name, let alone write it so poorly. He leaned in close, his voice right next to my ear, making it burn. Then, he said many things about his feelings and that he knew my heart. He also said that he would definitely protect me, no matter how wild or arrogant I was. He would love me and never let me suffer any grievances. I watched the ink on the paper dry. The 2 names on it seemed to engrave an eternal vow. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded firmly. He embraced me from behind and sighed softly. "Anbei, do you know how long I've been waiting for this moment?" He retied the jade for me and said word by word, "In this life, I will never fail you." A very long time later, he told me that at that moment, he thought he had bound me to him forever. He also thought we were finally connected in this life. But at that time I was standing there, looking at the towering walls of the Eastern Palace. No matter how hard I looked, I couldn't see the end. I could only withdraw my gaze. I told myself that it was just a joke. I had never taken it seriously. My fingers touched the jade. It felt cool. I knelt down to receive the decree. That day, I held the imperial decree in my hands, which trembled slightly. It was so precious, as if I were holding a sincere heart. The decree was not heavy, but it promised a lifetime. It turned out that my life was as fragile as a piece of paper. Because of this decree, the Qin family's army in the northern borderlands fought with great vigor and won several battles. The rewards flooded into the estate, and for a time, the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate was unparalleled in its glory. Finally, I had a chance to hold my head high. Before, my mother would force me to socialize with other young ladies, but I was disgusted by their hypocrisy. They clearly disliked me behind my back, so why bother with sweet smiles and sister-to-sister talk? Every word was laced with sourness, which made it awkward to reply and led to being looked down on if I didn't. Did they really think I couldn't hear? But now it was different. People came and went from our estate in droves. The threshold of the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate was almost worn down. Families rushed to bring their unmarried daughters to see me, and they all sweetly called me sister. I was grateful that I didn't hold a grudge. How they treated me before and how they treated me now made no difference. The wedding was set for the 9th day of the 10th month. The imperial astrologer said it was a rare auspicious day. People came in droves from the palace. Just the maids teaching me the rituals numbered 5. Though it was a happy occasion, it was exhausting. I complained to the crown prince that the wedding rituals were too complicated and made my hands ache. As he massaged my hands, he said, "The Eastern Palace has already prepared everything according to your preferences. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just wait for the day to put on your wedding dress and walk toward me." The front lines were winning continuously. My father and brothers sent letters saying that the war was at its most fierce, so they wouldn't be able to come home for the new year. Fortunately, we kept receiving news of continuous victories. Not just our family, but the entire northern border was fighting non-stop. Even the Grand General's estate hadn't returned to the capital. On the 11th and 12th of the first month, it snowed for 2 consecutive days. The roads were slippery, and guests were sparse. I, however, felt comfortable and peaceful. In the afternoon, the snow lightened. I took a small porcelain vase to the backyard to carefully collect snowflakes from the plum blossoms. A small maid named Lian Wei hurriedly followed me with an umbrella, shielding my head. "Miss, you can just tell me what you need. It's cold outside. Please go back to your room." I carefully let the snowflakes fall into the vase, sighing as I worked. I don't understand why we have to go through so much trouble to make plum wine with snow. It doesn't taste any different from regular water, just more troublesome. If you want to drink wine, just tell me to go buy some, she said. I shook my head. I found out from the Crown Prince's attendant that he likes this kind of wine. I've already copied down the recipe. If I make it now, we can drink it next year. It has to be made by my own hands. I shook the small vase in my hand. It took me half the afternoon to get this small bottle. Even his drinking water is so particular. He's really hard to serve. Lian Wei smiled softly. The Crown Prince even asked you to go see the Lantern Festival with him on the 15th. You and the Crown Prince have such a deep affection for each other. I thought to myself that if my eldest brother knew about this, he would definitely tease me, calling me a sentimental little girl. So, I gritted my teeth and decided to make 2 jars of wine. One for him, and one to give to my father and brothers next year, so they wouldn't have a chance to laugh at me. Maid, go get a thicker cloak for the miss. I stopped her. The wind and snow are much fiercer in the north, and I never caught a cold. Why would I be so weak? On the 14th of the first month, I finally buried the 2 jars of wine under the plum tree. Coughed lightly. I must have caught a cold. It was true that one shouldn't speak too boastfully, but I was afraid of bitter medicine. I thought it was just a small illness and my body was strong, so it would be fine. I hid it and didn't say anything. On the 15th, the night of the Lantern Festival, before I could see the lanterns, I was met with soldiers surrounding our estate. The leader said, "Your father and brothers disobeyed the emperor's orders and stubbornly pursued the enemy. They fell into a trap set by the Hu people. The 5,000-strong elite army is all dead. No one survived. No one survived." I couldn't react. My mind was blank, and tears streamed down the back of my hand. My mother, who had been a well-bred lady for so many years, had always remained dignified and composed, even during her most heated arguments with my father. But today, she collapsed to the ground, crawling to the man's feet and grabbing his sleeve, asking in a choked voice, "What do you mean? No one survived?" "No, I don't believe it. I want to see the Marquis." The man bent down and pulled his sleeve from my mother's grasp. "Madam, please restrain your grief. The Marquis and the heir apparent personally led the army and both died in battle. The second young master is escorting their coffins back to the capital and will arrive soon." How could this be? Just a short time ago, their letter said everything was fine and they would return after the war. They wrote that if they couldn't make it back for the new year, they would stay for a few more days and only leave after my glorious wedding. My eldest brother had never lied to me before, but now they couldn't even come home. The wine I made to celebrate their victory had just been buried. I remembered that when I was little, I always lost in my duels but loved to compete. When I was hurt, I would cry, and the strong northern winds would dry my tears and chap my face. My eldest brother always had a handkerchief ready to wipe my tears, comforting me and telling me that one day I would be more formidable than all of them. My father, seeing me cry, would be awkward and would just put on a stern face and shout, "What kind of Qin family descendant cries at the drop of a hat? Look at you." I was scolded so many times that I cried less and lost less often. That's right. I'm crying so much now. My father and brothers wouldn't be happy to see me like this. I quickly wiped away my tears and went to help my mother. The crime of defying the emperor's orders was punishable by extermination of the family. The soldiers surrounding our estate must have come with a decree. My grandmother, leaning on her ebony cane, came out trembling. She slammed the cane on the ground. "This old woman wants an audience with the emperor." The leader frowned slightly. "Old madam, I'm afraid that's not convenient." As he spoke, a servant rushed over, knelt before my grandmother, and offered her something with both hands. My grandmother took it with a trembling hand. "This old woman holds a life-sparing decree bestowed by the late emperor. Will that not be enough to grant an audience with the emperor? Our Marquis of Dingyuan's estate has been loyal since the founding of the dynasty. How many men have died on the battlefield for the country? How can you say we can just be wiped out?" The man bowed respectfully and said only one thing. "Old madam, please lead us to kneel outside the palace." My grandmother knelt first, followed by my mother, then me and my little brother. Even my 2 married sisters heard the news and came to kneel behind us. After the ceremony, my grandmother's clear voice rang out. "This old woman, carrying the late emperor's decree, will lead the entire Marquis of Dingyuan's estate to kneel until the emperor agrees to see us." The palace remained silent. Snow began to fall again. The snow on the ground had not yet melted. Kneeling for a long time, the snow under my knees melted and soaked through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. I could endure everything else, but I was worried about my grandmother, who was old and frail. A eunuch came out and said to my grandmother, "Old madam, it's cold. Please go back." My grandmother said nothing and continued to hold the decree high above her head. The eunuch sighed and went back into the palace. A moment later he came out again and said, "Old madam, the emperor asks you to wait in the side hall." Only then did my grandmother stand up. She didn't let anyone help her and staggered toward the side hall. We continued to kneel until sunset. The eunuchs and palace maids lit lanterns in the palace. My little brother, who was now more mature, was supposed to go to the north with my father next year. But he was still so young. At that moment, he secretly tugged on my sleeve. "Sister, I'm scared. They said father and eldest brother won't be coming back. Is that true?" I held his cold hand tightly. "Don't be scared. Your sister is here. Father and eldest brother died for the country. That is the greatest honor. You are a descendant of the Qin family. You should understand these principles. Life and death are small matters. The affairs of the state are what is most important." He was still confused. "If it's an honor, then why are we kneeling here?" I gently stroked his head. "Everything will be all right." But he lowered his head. His voice choked with sobs. "Sister, I don't want honor. I just want father and eldest brother. I miss them so much." I tilted my head back, letting my tears flow backward, and finally said nothing. My voice was hoarse. "Be good. Tonight is the Lantern Festival. It's supposed to be a night of celebration with lanterns and fireworks. But now, with things like this, the banquet has been cancelled." In the palace, however, the lanterns were still lit everywhere, a scene of family reunion. My legs were numb. My mother, kneeling in front of me, remained silent. I had caught a cold a few days ago and had started coughing. Now it was even worse, but I was afraid of worrying my mother, so I gritted my teeth and endured. I heard footsteps approaching. I turned my head and saw the crown prince standing under the eaves. His eyes fixed on me. It was a little dark there, so I couldn't see his face clearly. He just stood there for a moment. I was kneeling and he was standing. There was only a red lantern swaying in the wind and snow between us. I withdrew my gaze, sat up straight and closed my eyes. I heard his footsteps as he entered the palace. A long time later, he came out and walked toward me. I didn't look up, only seeing a pair of black shoes with cloud embroidery stop in front of me. Then a cloak fell over my shoulders. My hands, hidden in my sleeves, clenched tightly. For a moment, I wanted to reach out and grab the hem of his cloak. I wanted to tell him that I was also scared, and that I missed my father and brothers so much that my heart ached. I wanted to beg him to plead with the emperor, that my father and brothers were not arrogant fools. They loved their soldiers like family and would never have been reckless enough to lose 5,000 elite soldiers on the battlefield. There must have been an urgent situation on the front line, which is why they didn't have time to report back. But in the end, I didn't reach out. He also only paused for a moment and then walked away. My vision went dark, and I felt my strength draining away. My forehead was burning, but all I could do was clench my teeth and endure. Fortunately, not long after he left, the emperor also went to the side hall. I don't know how long we had been kneeling. The eunuch came out to deliver the decree and was called inside. I had already prepared for the worst. I quietly buried my face on the ground, listening to the eunuch's high-pitched voice. Each word fell onto the snow. The Marquis of Dingyuan was arrogant and disobeyed the emperor's orders. In consideration of the generations of service from the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate, their title is stripped, and their military power is revoked. The war on the northern border is urgent. To unexpectedly lose the Qin family's army and have to replace them would be a detriment to the nation. Therefore, all military power is handed over to the Grand General Xia Qi. The daughter of the Qin family is no longer worthy of being crown princess. Instead, the legitimate daughter of the Grand General Xia Nan, is appointed crown princess. The wedding date remains the 9th day of the 10th month. Qin Anbei is to be appointed Liangyuan and will enter the Eastern Palace on the same day. Compared to my expectations, this was much better. My mother let out a sigh of relief and, in a hoarse voice, led us to kowtow in thanks. I was probably running a high fever, and my mind was in a daze. Today's events felt like a long dream. Even with the carriage curtains, I couldn't block out the joyful atmosphere of the world. It was the night of the Lantern Festival, and the streets were still bustling. It all felt so surreal. When we arrived back at the estate, my mother looked much more cheerful, meticulously giving instructions for everything. I wanted to go to my room, but my grandmother called me over. "Child, come with me." I said nothing and followed my grandmother into her room. She had been holding on all day. The maid helped her onto the bed, and she coughed violently. When she looked up at me, her face showed a visible weariness and age. Fearing that I would pass on my illness to her, I sat a little farther away. My grandmother sighed. "Child, you've been wronged." I shook my head. "I don't feel wronged. I'm just worried about your health, grandmother." My grandmother was tired and spoke slowly. "I have a few things I want to tell you, child. Your father and eldest brother are gone. I know you're sad. I'm too. But you are a daughter of the Qin family. You have to be strong and hold on. This old woman needs you to hold on." She paused for a moment before continuing. "In the past, with our great power, I wouldn't have cared what you did. But now it's different. Our estate has fallen. We no longer have our title and have lost our military power. It won't be easy to rise again." I looked at my grandmother, and I seemed to understand her meaning. She closed her eyes and then opened them. "The decree appointing you as Liangyuan was personally requested by the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince will one day ascend the throne. The inner court and the outer court are inextricably linked." I lowered my head. "I understand, grandmother." My grandmother's eyes suddenly widened. "I hope you truly understand, child." As she spoke, she slowly stood up and bowed to me. I panicked and tried to stop her. "Grandmother, how can you do this? You're harming me." But my grandmother stubbornly knelt down. "From now on, you are no longer just yourself. Every word and action must be for the sake of our estate. Anbei, you must promise me that you will do your best to restore the Qin family's former glory. Otherwise, when this old woman closes her eyes, I will have no face to meet our ancestors. This is not me bowing to you, but the entire Qin family bowing to you." My mouth was dry and I was choked up. "I promise I will not fail you, grandmother." My grandmother looked relieved and nodded 3 times. I took 2 steps back and kowtowed heavily. As I stood up and walked out of the room, I vaguely heard my grandmother's choked sobs. Lian Wei was waiting for me outside. When she saw me, she came to me. "Miss, you should go back to your room and rest early. Tomorrow, the second young master will be back." I staggered toward the ancestral hall. My father and brothers, who loved me the most when they were alive, I couldn't even mourn them for 3 full years. Now, I will fulfill my filial duty a little, to make up for it somehow. My body had always been strong, and the fever had been so uncomfortable before, but now it was better, as if I had been reborn. I spent the whole night in the ancestral hall. Lian Wei brought me some porridge and urged me to eat, but I had no appetite. Lian Wei said, "Miss, you must be exhausted from overthinking." She brought the porridge to my mouth and gently touched my face. She immediately became alarmed. "Why are you so hot?" She touched my forehead and immediately tried to help me up. "Miss, you're very sick. You should rest. I'll go get a doctor right away." I was in a daze, still kneeling on the ground. She couldn't lift me, and her eyes immediately turned red. "Miss, don't torment yourself like this anymore. If the Marquis and the heir apparent are watching from heaven, they wouldn't want to see you like this." Hearing this, I looked up at her and let her help me stand. Just then, there was a commotion outside the gate. I'm so worried. It must be my second brother coming back. My legs were numb from kneeling for so long. I stumbled, pushing Lian Wei aside, and ran out. As soon as I reached the door, I saw the person approaching. My steps slowed. I couldn't take another step. The big red door was wide open. My second brother was wearing mourning clothes. His hair tied with a white cloth. He was always so flashy, changing clothes more often than I did. But now, because of his rushed journey, his face was covered in dust. His eyes were red, and he was haggard. In just one night he looked 10 years older. Behind him, 2 coffins were escorted, one in front of the other. Inside the coffins were the people I had been yearning for day and night, but could never see again. My family. My mother was still holding on, performing every ritual. I suddenly felt a coldness wash over me, as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. My heart contracted, and although I clenched my teeth, I was still trembling. My second brother and mother were saying something, but I couldn't hear them. And my vision started to blur. My second brother walked closer to me, his face full of exhaustion. He parted his lips. I tried my best to hear what he was saying. "I'm useless, second brother. I couldn't bring father and eldest brother back safely. This little red horse was personally chosen by father for you. I brought it back for you to have a memento." I wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, but before I could open my mouth, the world went dark. Everything spun. I only heard Lian Wei's panic scream. I saw my father and eldest brother again. I was little and had just learned to hold a spear. I wanted to learn from my father. He patiently held my hand and taught me, stroke by stroke, until I could perform the Qin family's spear techniques. He was happier than I was when I succeeded. He lifted me high above his head and spun me around a few times. My eldest brother was in the study, reading military books, looking as handsome as jade. He turned his head and smiled at me. "I knew you'd come looking for me." The sunlight in the study was too bright and a little harsh. I could only squint at him. He took out many boxes, saying they were things he had been saving all year, things he thought of buying for me. I opened each one, overjoyed. I looked up and smiled, about to thank him, when I saw my eldest brother wearing blood-stained armor, holding a sword to support himself. The blood flowed in a thin stream, dripping onto the ground. Countless blades shot at him from behind. I screamed and lunged forward, but I only lunged into empty air. I could only watch helplessly as the blades tore through him, as the blood gushed out as he fell. I hadn't even had a chance to find him a sister-in-law. The wind and sand blurred my vision. I seemed to hear many voices calling me. I heard my father's voice like a sigh, calling my name. Immediately after, a strong hand pushed me. I gasped and opened my eyes. Lian Wei cried out in joy. "She's awake. Miss is awake. Go tell the madam quickly." As she fed me water, she said, "Miss, you've been unconscious for 2 days. The doctor said that if you didn't wake up tonight, there would be no hope." The illness lingered until the middle of the 2nd month before I fully recovered. With my recovery, my mind also became peaceful, as if I had been reborn. It was a beautiful day. I was bored from lying down for so long, so I went to the backyard to relax. I suddenly saw a figure on the east wall. I watched warily. A person vaulted over the wall from behind, their movements incredibly quick and light, landing as softly as a feather. The person stood up, and it was Xia Cheng. He took a few long strides and came right up to me, immediately asking, "Are you fully recovered?" Though I was a little confused, thinking that this person must have a habit of not using the main gate, I was also a little moved and quickly replied, "I've recovered." His brows relaxed. I only came to ask you one question. Are you willing to come with me? I was shocked, thinking I had misheard. This was in broad daylight. Was he asking me to elope? He continued. When you were appointed crown princess, I was still in the north. Now that you are not the official princess, your days in the Eastern Palace will not be easy. Those words stunned me, and I couldn't help but be led by his thoughts. That would be different. People always say marriage is about a husband and wife, but concubines are like servants. What you're suggesting is no different from me marrying into the Eastern Palace. He said gravely. Of course it's different. I, Xia Cheng, will never marry anyone else. As long as you agree, I will protect only you for the rest of my life. He spoke so seriously, yet my mind was still in a fog. Maybe I had become stupid from being sick for so long. The more he spoke, the less I could follow what he was saying. He saw that I wasn't responding, and his eyes gazed intently into mine. As long as you agree, we can go anywhere. The northern border, the southern lands. I'll take you wherever you want. It was then that my jumbled thoughts finally coalesced. Running away was a serious matter, but defying an imperial decree was even more so. Even if I agreed, I couldn't implicate my entire family. Besides, I knew I wasn't worthy of young Master Xia's deep affection. Young Master Xia, I truly don't understand why you are so set on me. He was silent for a long time before speaking with difficulty. Last year I met your eldest brother once. He joked that if something were to happen, the person he would worry about most was you, and he asked me to look out for you. I let out a sigh of relief. In that case, young Master Xia, you don't need to worry anymore. He quickly said, do you really want to marry? With your temperament, you will be constrained in the Eastern Palace. Even without your brother's entrustment, I have always been sincere with you. Don't you understand at all? Besides, since I've already promised your brother, I interrupted him. I am marrying voluntarily. Since my eldest brother entrusted me to you, if you feel a debt, please accept this one request from me. About once I enter the Eastern Palace, it will be inconvenient for me to look after my family's estate. I hope young Master Xia can take care of it for me. Thank you in advance. If there is a day I can repay you, I will. His hand, which was about to rest on my shoulder, dropped. He smiled faintly. I understand. I agree to your request. The 9th day of the 10th month, the auspicious day of the Crown Prince and Crown Princess's wedding, was today. The day I entered the Eastern Palace was also today. I sat in my sedan chair, which the bearers carried steadily. I had once imagined what my wedding day would be like. In my imagination, there would only be a 10-mile stretch of red and a pair of hands reaching out to me. I would hold onto those hands and walk steadily, step by step, following that person. For now, I gently lifted the corner of the red veil, then cautiously peeked out of the sedan chair's curtain. Red silk was tied everywhere, and red lanterns hung throughout the Eastern Palace. The sound of firecrackers, though distant, was incessant. The joyous scene was just as I had imagined. Calculating the time, the wedding ceremony for the Crown Prince and Crown Princess must have already been completed. I still remember the elderly ritual mistress patiently correcting my posture for the ceremony. Your head must be bowed just so, and your arms raised to this height, she said. The Crown Prince's wedding is a state affair. All the civil and military officials will attend to offer their congratulations. There must be no mistakes. I have met the new Crown Princess a few times. She is gentle and dignified, and a perfect match for the Crown Prince. The sedan chair stopped, landing steadily on the ground. I gently put down the red veil and stepped out of the sedan chair. Lian Wei rushed to my side. Be careful, Mississippi. I held her hand and let her guide me into the palace. The red veil obscured my vision, and the feeling of not being able to see where I was going made me panic. As soon as I entered the door, I reached up and pulled the red veil down. Before Lian Wei could stop me, I smiled softly to reassure her. Today is the wedding day of the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. His Highness will certainly not be coming here. I'll feel more at ease if I take this off now. He thought for a moment. I might as well change out of this wedding dress now. Lien Wei replied in a low voice, a little choked up. But today is also your wedding day, Mississippi. It's so unfair. I feel it's not right for you. As I took the hairpin from my hair, I said languidly, "This isn't our estate anymore. You are my attendant. You must be more careful with your words. Only say these things to me." His Highness should be happy to have a crown princess. Lien Wei coughed softly. "I'll remember, Mississippi. I shouldn't have said things that make you sad. Please don't take it to heart. There is still a long road ahead." I looked out the window. It was already dark. The Eastern Palace had layers of high walls, and it seemed to go on forever. Yes, there was a long road ahead. After I changed my clothes, I couldn't sleep. I took a good look at the palace I would be living in for a long time. Everything was arranged to my liking. It was pleasing to the eye and clearly showed great care. I walked around and found a hidden corner with a weapons rack. It was small but exquisitely made, looking more like a decoration than a weapon rack. It didn't have a murderous aura and wasn't too conspicuous. I called Lien Wei and told her to bring the sword my eldest brother had given me and place it on the rack. The little red horse from a few days ago had also been brought to the Eastern Palace. The Crown Prince knew that it held special meaning for me and had made proper arrangements. After walking around, my mood improved. I sat down at a table, and Lien Wei brought my jade puzzle rings. Lien Wei brought my things and lit more lamps to make the room brighter. Since it was the wedding day, even the candles were pink. "Be careful not to strain your eyes, Mississippi, tomorrow. You have to go to the Crown Princess's palace to greet her, and then go with her to serve tea to the Empress. You should get some rest." I nodded to show I understood and told Lien Wei to leave me alone. I leaned on the table, quietly trying to untangle my jade puzzle rings, but I couldn't. I was feeling frustrated and a little sleepy when I suddenly heard Lien Wei at the door call out happily, "His Highness the Crown Prince." I was immediately wide awake. Someone lifted the bead curtain, and the Crown Prince walked straight in.